Okay. You're ready. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the members of the public that have joined us tonight. We're going to call our regular board meeting back to order. First item we have to deal with is the agenda. And Director Davis, you had an item that you wish to add?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair, a recreation contribution service.
Okay, that would be under new business. Seeing no more hands up, a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved by Director Davis, seconded by Director Marcotte. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have the regular board meeting minutes of July 25th. If there are no errors or omissions, a motion to adopt. Moved by Director Davis, seconded by Director Kuhn. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We can move down to the public input period, and we offer anyone in the audience the opportunity to speak to an item on the agenda for up to 3 minutes, if they so wish. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here on a hot day, but my purpose here is not to find a cool spot to hang out. Rather, I really want to be here. I really want to just be here to speak to the item of whether the road, whether a vote on the region is done regionally or by electoral areas. When I was here the last time, there was a long lineup of people ready to speak outside the door, and they all said, "Go to referendum," and most of them were opposed. And so I trust that you will listen to that constituency and the folks that are in favor of moving this project forward, because it's what you've heard, I believe. It's what also has been demonstrated in the work that you've had done in terms of your surveys and so forth that have showed that there's a high degree of interest in housing throughout the region. So I believe that it's a regional issue. It continues to be a regional issue. The more we talk about it, the more we learn about it, the clearer it becomes that it's not going away fast. So I trust that you will take those comments into account. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one coming forward, we can move on. Thank you. We can move right down to information. Mr. Berry.
Yes, Mr. Chair, 2 letters came in for information of the board. This was regarding your request to have a meeting regarding 5271 Bull Road access, the BC Transit facility. And there's a letter from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and from BC Transit declining attending the meeting.
Okay, any questions on that? Seeing no hands up, we can move on then to committee commission reports. And first up, we have Director Morrison with the Electoral Area Services Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee reports and recommends as follows from our meeting of August 1st, and the first ones, I believe, are for all directors. And does anybody want any of these items pulled?
Items 1 to 10. Nobody's.
Okay,
yeah.
Excellent. Item 1, that a grant in aid electoral area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $1,200 be provided to the Cowichan Bay Seniors and Community Association to support new community group in Cowichan Bay. 2.1, that an application for grant funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Green Infrastructure Environmental Quality Substream for the Shawnigan Wastewater Integration and Expansion Project, Electoral Area B, in the amount of $10 million be submitted, and that subject to grant approval, the board approves funding of up to $2.67 million, 26.67%, through capital reserve funds, operating reserve funds, and connection fees from partners and new customers. And 2, that an application for grant funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Green Infrastructure Environmental Quality Substream for the Saltair Water Treatment Expansion Project, Electoral Area G, in the amount of $6,030,000 be submitted, and that subject to grant approval up to a maximum of $1,608,201 or 26.67% in short-term borrowing for the Saltair Water Treatment Expansion Project be approved, and that the loan be paid back over 5 years under the liabilities under agreement section 175 of the community charter. 3, that the 2018 budget for function 232 Area B Parks be amended to 1, increase revenue donations by $5,000, 2, increase expenditures minor capital by $5,000, 3, increase capital miscellaneous revenue by $7,536, and 4, increase capital expenditure land improvements by $7,536. Item 4, that the 2018 budget for function 237 Community Parks Area G Saltaire be amended to 1, increase recovery of costs by $15,165, and 2, increase minor capital by $15,165. Item 5, that the 2018 budget for function 279 Parks and Trails be amended to 1, increase transfer from gas tax reserves by $44,000, 2, increase transfer from operating reserves by $3,033, and 3, increase deficit by $47,033. 6, the 2018 budget for function 281 Bright Angel Park be amended to reduce minor capital by $5,218. 7, the 2018 budget for function 282 South Cowichan Parks be amended to 1, increase capital transfer from gas tax reserves by $125,000, and 2, increase capital lease improvements by $125,000. 8.1, that the 2018 budget for function 351 Missachi Lake Fire Protection be amended to 1, increase deficit by $843, 2, decrease contingency by $843, 3, increase consultants expense by $18,470, and 4, increase transfer from operating reserve by $18,470. 2, that the 2018 budget for function 357 Honeymoon Bay Fire Protection be amended to 1, increase deficit by $8,335, and 2, decrease capital reserve fund by $8,335. 9, the 2018 budget for function 515 Garbage and or Recyclable Materials Collection be amended to 1, decrease surplus revenue by $38,045, and 2, decrease contingency MMBC by $38,045. And 10, that a license of occupation agreement with the BC Transportation Financing Authority beginning September 1st, 2018 for Gibbons Cairn Park on lands legally described as that part of Lot 1, Section 2, Range 5, Shawnigan District Plan 13606, PID listed there, and occupying a portion of the provincial road right-of-way located in electoral area B, Shawnigan Lake, be approved for renewal for a further 5 years, and I move those items.
Seconded by Director Clement. Any question? Yes, Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered what, so is the contingency for MMBC reduced because the surplus is bigger?
Mr. Kieber, are you able to answer that question?
I don't understand, because I wasn't at the EAC meeting.
Thank you. Either was I, but I'll attempt
Okay.
to answer the question. So a lot of these, majority of these amendments are really cleanups for the end of the year.
Okay.
Budgets were adopted for 2018 prior to knowing the year-end items. So now this is a cleanup, bringing all those carry-forward items. So what I'm seeing is probably the surplus in revenue was less than was anticipated. So they're simply taking it out of the contingency. So in this particular
Okay.
case, they're decreasing the contingency to balance off with this.
I see, okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call the question then. All in favor and opposed? Motion carries. Director Morrison again.
Items 11 and 12, electoral area directors only, that application number DVP 18F01 to vary section 5.12 sub 5 of zoning bylaw number 2600 to increase the maximum permitted height of a principal residential building from 7.5 meters to 8.5 meters be approved. And 12.1, that development permit application with variance application number DP 18B09 VAR at 2402 Barton Place be approved. 2, that section 5.14 of zoning bylaw number 985 be varied from 15 meters to 13.75 meters to allow a cantilevered deck into the setback area. And 3, that the general manager of land use services be authorized to permit minor revisions, and I move those items.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Kuhn. Any question on these? Electoral area directors only, all in favor and opposed, motion carries.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Morrison. We can move on to the report and recommendations of the Community Safety Advisory Commission. Director Dory.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Community Safety Advisory Commission, I think, was established in about 2003. And it was a committee at first, and then it became a commission. And from time to time, they've questioned how effective they've been. They've been effective to some degree. They had a few things that they did that improved the safety of people in the community. One was the barefoot in the park, and another was an audit of women's safety in the community, and a few other things. But anyway, we do have Safer Futures that does a lot of work in community safety, and we also have Social Planning Cowichan. Now, so the commission recommended 2 parts to their moving forward, and they were hoping that Safer Futures would carry more of the load, and also they do a lot of valuable work, and that we are duplicating some of the things that they are doing, and so there's 2 recommendations. The first one, printed in your agenda, I think should be shortened under the recommendation of Mr. Barry, that we should, number 1, that the Community Safety Advisory Commission be dissolved, but we'll delete the second part which says, and that the bylaw number 3622 be repealed. So we won't want to repeal it in the event that we want to revisit it in a year after we've seen what we've done. This is the case of Environment Commission and the Economic Commission as well. So the first one is, if I read, that the Community Safety Advisory Commission be dissolved, part number 1. And part number 2 is that Safer Futures be requested to consult with community and community safety stakeholders in determining current community safety priorities and a framework for addressing these priorities, including a process of regional collaboration and monitoring. Now, if Safer Futures comes to a conclusion that they need our help, they need some money, or they need for us to do something, they can do it. So
Okay, I've got a seconder from Director Day.
Okay, I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, all in favor?
I don't have a question.
Oh, Director Marsh?
Well, after we take the vote, can I speak about it for a minute, or do you want me to do it before?
Probably better to speak about it now, just in case.
Okay, I expect this is probably going to pass, so I would really like it if the board would send their thanks in regards to all those members who spent many, many, many hours looking at the issues and trying to make it more effective before they came to this decision.
That is something will do.
Excellent.
I'll call the question then. All in favor and opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Director Dory. We have to go back to CR1. We missed something. Director Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, there seems to have been a deletion off my speaking notes copy. We missed a number 13, which was published on the agenda. And it's an electoral area directors only. And it's number 13, that staff be directed to undertake an initiative to modernize the harmonized electoral area
Thank you.
official community plan and zoning bylaw. I move that item.
Okay, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any question on this? All in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. We can move to the report and recommendations of the Transit Committee, which is on a separate page, CR3, Director Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Transit Committee reports and recommends as follows. 1, that the annual operating agreement with BC Transit be approved for 12 months, commencing April 1st, 2018. 2, that amendment number 1 dated July 2nd, 2018 to the annual operating agreement with BC Transit to include the conventional service expansion of 1,500 hours and the estimated annual cost for the July 2nd, 2018 service changes be approved. Number 3.1, that the 3-year service expansion initiatives for 2019-2020 to 2021-22 outlined in BC Transit's letter of July 3rd, 2018, and the accompanying expansion memorandum of understanding be approved. 3.2, that the 500-hour conventional system expansion targeted for July 2019 implementation be approved, and the associated 6-month estimated cost of $11,616 be included in the 2019 CVRD transit budget for Function 107. 3.3, that transit service expansion hours and associated costs for 2019-20 to 2021-22 be incorporated into the 5-year financial plan for transit budget functions 106 and 107. 3.4, that staff review the feasibility of advancing the in-service date to approximately September 2020 for the proposed conventional service expansion initiative of 2,000 hours for the Cowichan to Nanaimo service connection currently planned for September 2021. 4.1, that a bylaw be prepared to amend the Transit Service Establishment Bylaw number 1450 by 1, adding the town of Ladysmith to sections 7 and 8, which pertain to the commuter transit service, and 4.1.2, changing the apportionment of costs in section 8 to assessment-based. That concludes my report.
Thank you, seconded by Director Stone. Any question on this? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director Davis. We can move on to staff reports. Mr. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first staff report from Legislative Services regarding required resolutions for the regional referendums that you have are expecting to take to the people here in October. Good news, the Inspector of Municipalities has approved both of the bylaws, so they're set to go. There's certain recommendations, and I'll just walk them through you now. When we do a regional referendum, we need to appoint a regional voting officer. This way, then the municipalities are essentially acting as a presiding election officer that allows us to issue ballots through the municipality. So the first resolution, that Kathleen Harrison be appointed regional voting officer and Shannon Carlo be appointed deputy regional voting officer for the Cowichan Housing Association annual financial contribution service referendum and the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service referendum to be held in conjunction with the 2018 general local elections.
Moved by Director Jackson, seconded by Director Clement. Any question on this? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
The second recommendation is regarding how you are going to count the votes. You have a choice. The default act under the the default position under the Local Government Act is each area will be counted area by area by area. If it fails in one, the entire service ceases to be, will not proceed. Or you can count it, think of it as an umbrella, as a majority of all the votes counted together. And Mr. Kieber's just going to say a few words on the regional model there.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. So from staff's perspective, when we do a regional referendum, it's not recommended that you go area by area, for the simple fact that if you do that, it will eventually fail due to one area not voting for it. And what that means is we'll have basically spent $100,000 approximately to go towards this initiative, and ultimately have it not successful. So if this motion is not passed, staff are recommending that you do not go to the Act's position where it's just area by area, and that you actually stop and you come back and you reassess and what is and go forward either the next year or the year after that with a new approach, because area by area, it's prone to fail, and then you will not be able to go forward with something else after that. So that basically applies for both the housing as well as the drinking water, new function. So staff are recommending both go by the entire area.
Okay, thank you for that.
So the recommendation that staff are putting forward, Mr. Chair, that participating area approval for the adoption of Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw number 4201 be obtained for the entire proposed service area. And just a note, this requires 2/3, so it needs 10 of you to vote yes, at least 10.
Moved by Director Marsh, seconded by Director Day. Any question or comment on this? I'll call the question then. All those in favor and opposed? We have Directors Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, and Jackson opposed. The motion carries.
The third recommendation, that participating area approval for the adoption of Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service Establishment Bylaw number 4202 be obtained for the entire proposed service area. And again, 2/3 affirmative is required.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Davis. Any question on this? All those in favor and opposed? We have Directors Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, Jackson, and Dory opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Number 4, specific advertising for legislative reasons. We either publish an entire version of the bylaw or we can use a synopsis. And it's recommended that you approve the following synopsis for Bylaw 4201. Bylaw 4201, the Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw will allow the CVRD to annually requisition up to $765,000 to assist the Cowichan Housing Association with costs associated with providing programs and services relating to affordable housing and homelessness prevention in the Cowichan Valley.
Moved by Director Davis, seconded by Director Nicholson. Director Jackson.
Can you add a link to where they can find the full bylaw?
Sorry, I have to ask you to turn your microphone on, please.
I was wondering if you could add a link onto that to where people who are interested could actually read the whole one. I'm not opposed to this. I think it's probably a pretty good idea. But there's going to be people who will want to read the whole thing. So
Mr.
if you
Berry?
could add a link, that would be
Mr.
great.
Chair, through to Director Jackson, yes, that'll happen in the advertising anyways. Yeah, the synopsis itself, this is for the text that we'll be using.
Thank you. I'll call the question then. All in favor and opposed? Director Kuhn opposed. The motion carries. Sorry, Director, anyone else opposed?
Marcotte.
Director Marcotte as well opposed. The motion carries.
And number 5, that the following synopsis of Bylaw 4202 be approved. That Bylaw 4202, the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service Establishment Bylaw, will allow the CVRD to annually requisition up to $750,000 to establish a service for the purpose of drinking water and watershed protection within the Cowichan Valley Regional District.
Moved by Director Davis, second by Director Day. Any question on this? All in favor and opposed? Directors Marcotte, Kuhn, Dory, and Yanni DiNardo opposed. The motion carries.
That's it for that
Thank
staff
you.
report.
Moving on to SR2.
A staff report from the Public Safety Division. This is a summary of the Missachi Lake Community Meeting that was held on July the 15th, and it's for information.
Any questions from that synopsis? Okay, seeing none at this time. Moving on then to bylaws.
And Mr. Chair, in front of you this evening, we have 2 bylaws. And when you do a regional referendum, you need to set the question by bylaw. So in front of you is bylaw 4228, the Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service Referendum Question Bylaw, and it's put forward for first three readings.
Moved by Director Day, seconded by Director Clement. Any question on this? All in favor? And I'm sorry, Director Nicholson?
Yeah, I actually don't think the wording is good enough, clear enough, I guess, for a referendum question. I think it's really important when you put something on the ballot that it's clear. And to me, repeating the same thing, Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service, twice doesn't provide any clarity. And so I would like to propose some alternate wording. And I have it written down here, and I'm going to do the same for the next one, and I could send it around so everyone could look at it if that's okay. So let me see. Forward to the board, right?
If you could include
And
Mr.
Joe.
Berry and
Yes.
Mr. Keeber
Oh, yeah, and Mark.
and Shen Carla.
And Shannon.
Mr. Chair, is there any way to have it on the, once it's sent, to put it up on the board?
Mr. Berry?
The board isn't working. So for has everyone got them? Should I carry on?
I think you're going to need to read it out.
We all got it by email.
Okay, so I'll read them out, but just to be clear, there was a best practices format that you received in your report, and the only thing I've done is replace the repetition of the name of the bylaw with wording that came out of the previous wording that we just approved in the, as the synopsis. And I wanted to clarify also for people that the money that we're requesting as an annual requisition was for a regional service, so it would be money for across the region, which I think is an important point for people to understand. So I'll read it out. Are you in favor of the Cowichan Valley Regional District adopting bylaw number 4201, Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw 2018 to support the provision of regional programs and services related to affordable housing and homelessness prevention, and annually requisition $765,000 for that service?
Okay, thank you for that. Do I have a seconder for that? Mr. Berry?
Mr. Chair, there was I heard at least one word in there that is not in the bylaw. And that's the danger of making this up at the last moment here. We followed the Local Government Management Association best practice, which of course has been reviewed by their lawyers, and it's been in front of you. And here we're trying to tweak it at the last moment. I have a suggested change myself, but using the wording in the bylaw, if you were to wish to include the purpose.
Well, I'm going to suggest we hear your version as well, and then we can decide what to do next.
thought I heard the word supporting. Yeah, and that's not in the so in the bylaw, Mr. Chair, the purpose is the district wishes to establish a service for the purpose of assisting the Cowichan Housing Association with costs associated with providing programs and services related to affordable housing and homelessness prevention in the Cowichan Valley. So I was going to propose, based on the discussion we had this afternoon, are you in favor of the Cowichan Valley Regional District adopting Bylaw 4201, Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw 2018? That would establish the Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service for the purpose of assisting the Cowichan Housing Association with costs associated with providing programs and services related to affordable housing and homelessness prevention in the Cowichan Valley, and annually requisition $765,000 for the service. So it's basically just taking the purpose right out of the bylaw, which we have done in previous referendums, and placing that in there.
Thank you. Director Marsh, then Director Dory.
So again, Mr. Chair, I request that we take the time to have them, if we can, up so that we can look at them, because we've put a lot of time into this, and I really appreciate staff want to get it right and do best practices, and I appreciate also what Director Nicholson is saying. So it would be easier for me, I'd feel more comfortable if we could all see the options, because I think I heard from Mr. Berry's that Cowichan Housing Association was named 3 times, and rather than the 2 that were already causing a director a bit of confusion, and it is confusing, they too. So I just think it would be valuable to have them both.
Okay, just for clarity, Mr. Berry, there are,
That's Director Nicholson's. But
number 1 is,
number 1 is on the housing, but we need to have Mr. Berry's up there at the same time, I think.
it's coming,
Okay.
Ms. Carlo is working on it.
I'll just say yes, yeah, I'm good with that.
Director Dory, do you want to wait with your question until we see both copies, or?
I would like to speak now.
Okay. While we're waiting for that, Director Dory, I'm going to turn to you.
Yes, thank you. For me, reading this question, I want to put myself in the position of a taxpayer. When we talk at the local level about taxation, we quite often mention the cost per 100,000. That means something to the local people in Saltaire. When they know how much per 100,000 they're paying on different things, and that's where they can translate. If they're in a $400,000 home, they know that $7 per 100,000 would translate into $28. So that really makes sense to taxpayers to have a translation. $765,000 means like a lot of money to them, but if they realize that they're only paying a smaller amount than what they think. So clarity is the most important thing in this, and that if you can translate the amount in money per 100,000, alongside the 765,000, it would mean a big deal to somebody who's voting, and it may change their opinion about how much the money is worth. That's my opinion anyway.
Mr. Berry?
Mr. Chair, what Director Dory is asking for, I'll make this more complicated. Back in 2014, we had 9 separate referendums, you'll recall, for the Chesterfield Sports Society referendum. You could follow the example we did back then if you think this is clear, and obviously it's written for the Sportsplex. Are you in favor of the board adopting Bylaw 3838, Chesterfield Sports Authority, annual financial contribution, that would allow the CVRD to annually requisition the greater of $9,860 per year, or an amount equal to the amount that could be raised by a property value tax of 0.01839 per 1,000 of net taxable value of land and improvements, to assist the Chesterfield Sports Society with costs associated with the operation and maintenance of the Cowichan Sportsplex. That's what you asked last time, 4 years ago. So you could go that extreme, or you could do the question in front of you that was taken in my staff report. Here's what is recommended from the best practice, and this is what's causing a little bit of angst. Are you in favor of the name of local government adopting name of bylaw that would establish the type of service and annually requisition dollar amount for the service? And I followed that exactly. It doesn't seem to be a problem for the Cowichan watershed or the drinking protection, but on the housing association, because it's listed twice, is what I've heard Director Nicholson say.
Well, to be fair, there was extra language that she was recommending as well. Yeah. I've got Director Nicholson next.
Well, I would first like to give you some background. It was very interesting talking this afternoon with Joe about this, because what I learned was that we will do a very expensive campaign to make sure that people have information about what these services, proposed services are. But that information won't be available when they go to vote. So they will have had to do their homework ahead of time. And I would guess that a lot of people won't. So they will be walking in a little bit blind. What else was I going to say? There was something else anyway. It's left me anyway. And so I really think it's important to not repeat the words twice. I think you need to kind of frame it slightly differently so people kind of pick up on what you're talking about. And recognizing there's very little flexibility here, the bylaws will be posted in the room so they can go up and read the bylaw, the proposed bylaw, but that's the only information that they can actually access at the voting thing. So I thought at least we could do is take the words from the bylaw synopsis, which we just approved, and insert them. And if I made a mistake by putting in support, then let's just get rid of support. We can just say we can say assist or just for the provision of services. I mean, you know, I think the fewer words you can use, the clearer it will be, and we just shouldn't keep repeating ourselves. And the notion that it's a regional service is, I think, very important, because we are not able to provide the information that Director Dory, which we originally thought was important to put in there, and that was what started this whole conversation. But because we can't do that, I think at least being clear about the fact it's regional is important. Anyway, I won't say anything.
Director Dory?
Yes, I want to revisit that argument a bit again. When we gave all the decimal points for the sportsplex, that was confusing. People can't do that kind of arithmetic in their head, so much per thousand, but they can certainly do the per 100,000. That right away they can say, they can figure out they got a $500,000 house. It's 5 times the number. Yeah, we can afford that, or we can't, one of the two. So I know I've seen on bylaws the 1,000, and you have to do quite a bit of figuring, and most people need a calculator for that. But the 100,000, they can picture it clear as day. So I'm still campaigning for per 100,000, and I'd like Mr. Barry's opinion on whether that can be accommodated or not.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Dory, at the end of the day, it's your decision. The Finance Department has certainly found over the years going with the 1,000 per 1,000 is easier for people because it's a simple mathematical calculation. If your house is worth 583, it's 583 times the amount. If it's done per 100,000, yeah, okay, it might be 5.25, but Mr. Keeber would be probably much better to answer this.
Mr. Keeber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand it'll be easier to understand, but at the end of the day, you have to be very specific of, because this is what this, if it gets approved, that's what finance will be doing. I'll refer to Director Marcotte in Area H. At the time, this goes back maybe, I don't know how many years, the wording was such that right now she has no choice but to tax a certain rate. So if the assessment's double, doesn't matter if they need it or not, it must tax that rate. So per 100, and so at the end of the day, it keeps going up higher and higher simply because assessments go up. So you have to be very specific and careful of what you put in that referendum question, because that's all that you can go with. That's why best practice is go with this bylaw. So the bylaw has the maximum, and it has wording like up to. The wording that Joe read off, to be honest with you, I listened to it and it was complicated to me, and I deal with that stuff daily. So I can't imagine someone from the public trying to follow that. I understand where Director Nicholson is coming from. It does. I'm looking at that. I'm going, well, change the other couple words, and you're there. It's simple. It's clear. It's clean, and it's concise. I would way rather that than some per 100, because you have per 100,000, and the per 100,000 is different than what the bylaw says, because the bylaw is the maximum, is the rate for the maximum overall requisition. The rate per 100,000 is the residential. Those are two completely different rates, meaning coming up with two completely different dollars. So you're just going to confuse people even more. They're going to say, well, that number's different than the bylaw. So by having the full dollar figure, it's clear. By having regional, it tells people, okay, this is a regional, going to share it over the entire region. You have to remember, we're going to be spending a significant amount of money and time and energy and effort, as will the Housing Association, on explaining this. Going, whether it's in open houses, whether it's public meetings, whether it's in rec centers. When we did the parks requisition bylaw, that's what happened, and that was successful. That was a regional one, went regional, plus it was approved in every area. It was not defeated in any area. So that is what we are recommending. I'm not sure. I don't want to step on Joe's area because this is his expertise. It's simple and clean is what I'd recommend, but not would go with some of those numbers.
Okay, thank you, Director Stone.
Just a question. So just to be clear, if you put the dollar amount in there, you're kind of tied to that because that was in the referendum question. So if you put so much per 100,000, assessments go up, okay. And so Director Nicholson's proposed change, are you, just to be clear, you're saying that you would prefer Mr. Barry's version of the, no disrespect to Mr. Barry, but I would agree with Director Nicholson that the proposed thing there to me is a lot more clear, and I'm sitting at this table, than from the report. And I guess, you know, I understand best practice, but if best practice tells somebody nothing, and I appreciate what you're saying, but we all know that no matter how much engagement you do, often 4 out of 5 people still have no idea what they're talking about when they get to the time to put their input in. And if we're asking them to go to the polls and what's in the report is there, I don't know, I worry along with Director Nicholson.
Mr. Berry has a suggestion.
Okay.
I have a suggestion that Director Nicholson and myself have come up with the wording here. If you take a look at number 1, and the question is, are you in favor of the Cowichan Valley Regional District adopting Bylaw 4201, Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw 2018? Instead of to support, for the purpose of assisting the Cowichan Housing Association with costs associated with providing programs and services related to affordable housing and homelessness prevention in the Cowichan Valley. That's right out of the bylaw you've already given first 3 readings to. And finish with an annually requisition $765 for that service.
Okay, Director Nicholson?
Well, first of all, I think we need to leave the regional programs and services in, because I think that's important. And I think we can just, in my suggestion, I would like to revise it to be, to provide regional programs and services, and not have any of that other long, I mean, I just think we're unnecessarily lengthening a question, so people would have a hard time reading to the end of it. So the shorter the better, from my perspective.
Director Stone?
I don't disagree with what Director Nicholson just said. And again, I just found that when I was listening to the question, it might read better on paper, but it seemed unwieldy and a bit long. But I can, you know, I hate doing this, crafting stuff like this on the fly. We should have workshopped it first. But the one thing that's missing from the proposed from Director Nicholson, including the changes, is the up to piece, because I think that's important. In Mr. Barry's bylaw, it says up to 765. So I would support the changes from Director Nicholson as long as it said up to 765. What's that? Yeah, and the regional piece. Can I just throw something out there? And we're way ahead of schedule, so let's just take it easy. And I've been quiet all day, so now you got to listen to me for a minute.
I want to note that that's true. He has been very good.
Hey, and all I did in transit was made a good, concise, clear case. That my opinion, of course. Are you in favor of the Cowichan Valley Regional District adopting Bylaw 421, Cowichan Housing Association Annual Financial Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw 2018? That's half of the wordiness right there. And to provide regional programs and services related to affordable housing and homeless prevention and annual requisition up to $765,000 for that service.
Okay, and just, I'm going to take that as a motion and a seconder, but I'm going to turn to Mr. Barry. Does that motion encapsulate, have within it what is required under?
Mr. Chair, I would say both Mr. Keever and I must see it in writing.
I can type it right up right now.
Yeah. Just wait a second. Okay, it's been emailed to our, yeah. So
Thanks, Kate.
we're just going to take a moment.
Fast fingers, Mark.
We're going to take a moment just to read that. Director Dory. Mr. Keever?
Mr. Chairman, I think, I'm looking at Mr. Barry, but I think from my perspective, and I think from Joe's perspective, that this would work.
Okay, so we have a motion that's been moved and seconded, and Mr. Barry?
Mr. Chair, I'll just frame the motion that bylaw 4228 be amended to use this as the question.
Okay, so that's the motion we have on the table. Can I?
So right now, what you're doing is you're actually amending the draft bylaw that's in front of you with this wording.
So we're voting on the amendment first or the amended motion?
So what we're going to do is we're going to amend the bylaw
Right.
to have this wording, and then we'll go through first three readings and adoption.
Okay, so this is the amendment. I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Motion opposed, Director Marcotte. Motion carries. So first three readings of the amended motion. All in favor of, sorry. Yeah, you don't want me skipping a step? Moved by Director Stone. Mr. Barry?
Yeah, so now you are giving first three readings, not to a motion, but to bylaw 4228.
Okay, thank you. Moved by,
That's amended, yeah.
moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Nicholson. All in favor and opposed? Director Marcotte. Kuhn, Jackson, and Yanni DiNardo opposed. The motion carries.
And then bylaw 4228 for adoption.
Moved by Director Marsh, second by Director Day. Did you want to? All in favor? Opposed? Director Yanni DiNardo, Director Marcotte, Director Kuhn, and Director Jackson opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're moving on to the second bylaw. In front of you, but I won't read out the recommendation. You have bylaw 4229 slated for first three readings.
Right.
If anyone has any changes, or if you want to go with the recommended best practice.
Director Stone.
I believe Director Nicholson sent a similar change to wording with the housing one.
So,
Wonder if we could see that. And following the same framework we worked around here, I think we could probably come up with something that was,
okay, so can we put that once again to Mr. Berry and Mr. Kieber? Yeah. Ms. Carlo, are you able to? Thank
can
you.
I, just could edit it on there and send it to you. Sorry.
Yes.
Talk to Mark. That's Mark, that's finance.
Because they have this long thing, I just went, I have the other one too.
Director Stone?
Just a question to Mr. Berry. I just wondered his input on that as a potential question for the referendum.
You should be okay with that.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Stone, I'm just looking up to compare. I'm just a little concerned right at this moment of the line that says, "and watersheds." I'm thinking that might have been done just a little too fast.
Can I just make a suggestion, Mr. Chair?
I would like you to hang on until we have Mr. Berry's attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I need everybody to, Mr. Kieber, I need everybody to,
So the wording in your bylaw, 4202, says, the CVRD wishes to establish a service, and here we go, for the purpose of drinking water and watershed protection within the Cowichan Valley Regional District.
Director Stone?
So if I may, if we just change the last line to say, after 2018, to provide regional programs related to drinking water and watershed protection, and annually requisition up to $750,000 for that service.
That got the nod, so we can make that change. Director Nicholson?
Well, I would just like to point out that you did use those words in the bylaw 4202 summary.
If,
Under number 2. protecting drinking water and watersheds.
If I'm,
Director Stone?
I think that we're just moving a couple words around to follow the actual name of the bylaw. So if we say 2018 to provide regional programs related to drinking water and watershed protection and annually requisition up to $750,000 for that service, I think it's frankly, to me, from a grammatical standpoint, it's clearer, and it's still almost exactly the same. We're just moving, changing the grammar somewhat.
Mr. Kieber?
So, I'm with Director Nicholson, I know nothing about grammar, but I'm about numbers. And I look at that and I have concern, because and Ms. Miller came and whispered in my ear, and I have the same concern about the one we just passed. The way those wordings is worded, it says that you would up to 750 and never above it. The way the bylaws are written right now, it says the greater of this rate and that dollar figure. And so assessments would go up, that rate would be applied to a higher assessment, and you would be taxing higher than 750 or 765. The way these wordings are, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Director Marsh?
Are you referring to that section in the bylaw where it says .045
Yes.
per thousand? So how does this wording change that?
So this.
Adding the up to?
This
No,
was a finite amount.
The way it's worded right now, it says up to 750.
So what should it say?
Whereas the bylaw says the greater of 750 or whatever the rate is per thousand. It goes on and on, to be honest, similar to what was done with the sportsplex.
So we need to add that.
So you would need to add this to give you the option,
Back to confusing.
to give you the option of going higher than the 750 or the 765.
Yeah.
And I guess, to be honest with you, to be fair to Mr. Barry, this is why he
Yeah.
suggested not to do all these things.
Except he had it wrong.
Okay, that's, let's not make comments like that, please. I don't think that's right. Obviously, you didn't anticipate a limit to this over the years, so there are things that we need to fix here. And I'm just wondering if we need to take a 5-minute break and go to another room, or a 10-minute break and go to another room, and just, I think we have the direction of the board, but to craft it in a way that we accommodate these concerns. Director Stone?
So just ask a question. Would not removing up to from the question resolve it? Because I'm reading Mr. Barry's question that was in the report. There's nothing of what you just mentioned in that question. It says, like under the Cowichan Housing Association, annual financial contribution, annually requisition $765 for that service. The only difference in intent there or content is the up to. If you remove the up to from both of the questions that we're debating, would that not solve the problem? Because in the previous question for Cowichan Housing and in the one I'm looking at, there's no other material change there other than to the description and the addition of the words up to. If the concern is around the financial hinge on up to, then remove the up to from both questions.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the only consideration. I think the commitment to a single number is, I think, a concern.
The commitment to the single number, Mr. Chair, is in both of
Yeah.
the corporate
Well,
secretary's
maybe that was an error.
Okay.
So, I think I'd like to go in the other room with these two gentlemen, and so if we can have a motion to have a 10-minute break. Moved by recess, moved by Director Marsh, second by Director Day. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I would like to call us back to order and thank you for your patience. So this is, after working on this is our recommendation to change the wording to reflect what had been recommended and also put in what we felt was necessary to have the, to avoid the situation where you have a single requisition limit number. Director Jackson.
I'm sure there's a really good answer to this question. Why are you doing it per thousand rather than per 100,000?
Mr. Kieber.
The reason is that per 100,000 is the rate we use for the residential property owners. This rate applies to all properties within the service area, business, farm, industry. So that's why you use this rate, and all those classifications have different multiples to come up with their cost per 100,000.
Okay, so we had a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We're going to need to make 3 rescinding motions. Perhaps, because this is up on the screen, and before we go back and rescind things and change things, if we have agreement of this, then I'll lead you through what we need to do to go back and replace it with this.
Okay. Okay, so first would be a motion to. Director Acton?
Thank you. I just need a clarifying question with combination of this and a comment that was made earlier. Does the actual function only go up to $750,000? I guess I'm still confused by this because, anyway,
Mr. Keeber?
please clarify that.
So CVRD, well, we call them, they're called conversion bylaws. And what that means is it sets the maximum requisition that you can tax in any 1 year. The board has the choice to go anywhere from that number or down to something 0 or anywhere in between. So the way it works is there's an escalator so that if the over annually, if costs go up, the new rate or that rate that you see in there can be applied to the overall assessment values within that service. So as assessments go up, you can actually tax greater than the dollar figure if the board chooses. And the reason for that is that you're not amending if you're at the maximum dollar figure 1 year, you're not having to amend bylaws each and every year as just the cost of living go up. There's the rate can be applied to higher assessments that allow you to tax more. So every bylaw, not every, 90% of our bylaws are set up this way. So once again, it doesn't mean you must go up to that figure, but it does allow you to tax higher than the dollar figure. Right now, when you adopt it, that rate equates to that dollar figure.
So then why do we have the provision of after 5 years, you're able to raise it, the requisition?
The reason for that is that sometimes certain services are expanding exponentially greater than just the cost of living. Maybe it's a completely new service that are being added. I'm thinking about transit as an example. Transit, new lines or go up to Nanaimo, they need the ability to expand to do. That's why you had that 5 year. And in some years, that's not even enough, and that's when the board goes out again to the public and asks for a higher rate.
But it's not cost of living, it's the value of the assessments, because those are quite different.
Okay, Director Marsh?
So I really acknowledge the work that the staff did on this to protect us for the purpose of what Mr. Keeber's saying. And I have to say out loud that this is just as confusing to me as almost more than if I was just feels confusing, because I think I would think, is there some kind of trick? Either this or that, and how do I have to add that? I find it's confusing wording, so I wish there was a way we could do it to make it simpler and not, are you saying it would tie our hands to leave it the other way?
Absolutely.
There's not a simple way to say what everything in red after 765,000 says, like in, sort of like grade 5 language?
Technically, that is as simple as they can get. And that's why
Seriously.
it goes back to best practices, is that you approve bylaw 4202 to do X, and you don't have any dollar figures in it. And the dollar figures are based on the bylaw, so you don't repeat everything in the bylaw.
So why don't we just vote?
Well, we talked about that, because we looked at that, and personally, I didn't like it either. It's very confusing, and so
Well, I
we felt, though, that we had made a commitment to put numbers in there, so we did our best to put those numbers in there. Having said that, if the board felt that was too confusing, the alternative is go back to very similar language to what we did for the parks.
I'm going to ask
So if
Mr.
I-
Berry to read that.
Well, if I may, before because I'm still not clarified, is that all right?
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Kieber, when you say the amount in, are you saying that you would prefer to have no amount in and just have it in the bylaw, not even the 765?
That's best practice, and I prefer that because it's very clean, but it doesn't, in our discussions we've had early in the year, early in the day, you talked about those individuals who aren't getting educated, who aren't learning all that information. You wanted something in the referendum question would allow them to figure that out at the spot. This is what's attempting to do that, but it's very confusing for them to do that. And
Well, what I find confusing is I believe, that it's been a few hours since I read it, that Mr. Berry's bylaw had the 765,000 in it. So I don't understand what you're saying.
And
Because if you didn't want to have the 765 in it, that is what I think you're saying, I don't actually have a problem with that.
so, that's good. My thinking
We have
is,
a problem
when
with
I
it
went
anyway.
back and looked at the actual wording of the bylaw that was being proposed, at the end of the day, we would have been limited to those dollar numbers. And that might have been fine, but we.
Oh, because the bylaw we passed in April
No, not in April, no. The proposed wording in the referendum questions.
From today,
From
from
today,
earlier.
the very first one had a dollar figure. And in retrospect, when we looked at it in closer detail, it never did say greater of. It just said those dollar figures, and you would have been limited to that.
And we would normally have that in there for most bylaws.
normally have what in there?
That clause which explains the greater of.
So it was really kind of messed up at the beginning.
So it was, in my perspective, it was messed up at the very beginning.
Okay.
And we caught it through this whole process, so
Which is
that's
a
a
good
good thing.
thing.
And we stepped back and we have the opportunity to do it this way, or
Mm-hmm.
go back to just simply adopting the bylaw.
Well, that's my reaction. I'd love to hear my colleagues' reaction.
Director Stone.
For more clarity, so you're saying that you could just end the first one after housingless and homelessness preventions, full stop? And
What
that
I'm
would be
s-
considered best practice?
Well, I'm saying is that I would like Mr. Berry to read out this question, the previous referendum question, and phrase this similar to that.
Mr. Berry.
10 years ago, we went to the people in a regional referendum about the regional parkland acquisition. I'm going to read you the question that was asked back at that time. Are you in favor of the board adopting bylaw 3163, Regional Parkland Acquisition Fund, Service Establishment Bylaw, to establish an acquisition fund to provide for expenditures in respect to acquiring regional parkland within the Cowichan Valley Regional District?
That's it.
No numbers. They're in the bylaw. And and I keep coming back to this, we're asking people, are you in favor of the board adopting the bylaw? So 10 years ago, we had no numbers in there. Today, in retrospect, the first one should have had the or greater of, and now we've gone to this.
Because there was input that people arriving at the voting chamber needed more information. So that's the reason we put that in there, from that request. So there are two ways to go. So I have Director Acton next.
This is like a comedy of errors or something, I don't know. But we've been having this discussion. First, we started off at like 2.5 million and 1.2 million or something. Now it's 765, and that's where I thought we were. And then now it's kind of like we're not really sure that's where we are, because we had this conversation like, oh, is that enough or maybe not enough? And then we said, well, if some major watershed function, some major watershed, something happens where we need a bunch of money, we can go back to the public really quickly and add to it. So now we're kind of saying, well, no, we have a sliding scale now, actually. I find this really
So just to be
Interesting.
clear, the number in the bylaw, the number on the screen is related to the current property value tax of, the rate is.
right. But we
So
were
that's
telling
not a
the
sliding
public
scale.
765 for
current-
5 years, unless something happened, then we would come back to you. And now that's not really the case.
Mr. Keeble?
So just to clarify, so there is, if something happens where you want to tax more than this, there is no ability other than go back to ask the people.
Yeah.
Those are your only options, and that is not a little, simple little change. That's a 6-month process at the minimum.
Yeah.
So, the dollar figures are, you're locked into that over a 5-year period. And even then, you're able to go up by 25%. But if you want something major, you are going to be going back to the people and asking another referendum question.
Director Jackson?
I find this quite simple. Are you in favor of doing this? It's going to cost either that or that. And that's as simple as it is. I think that having a referendum question with no money figure attached is a terrible way to do it. For instance, I know quite well that in our amalgamation referendum a number of years ago, had the figure at the end of the day been added in, it'll probably cost this much money. Because I think people just thought, oh, seems like a pretty good idea. But had they known it was going to cost that much money, I think the result would have been quite different. So I think putting the dollar amount in is an honest way to go. And, you know, maybe it's not exactly the way people would like to see it, but this is probably as honest as you're going to get. So even though I hate the whole idea, I think you're clarifying the question.
Thank you. Director Day?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And what I heard before you gentlemen went into the back room was that besides Director Nicholson's change in the wording, that we were looking for more detail in the question, and I think you came back with that, so now we're going back as too complicated. But let's not forget there's a huge amount of public engagement that's going to go on for this, and if you want people to be educated when they get to the ballot box, then this is going to do it. So I'm okay with this.
Thank you. I've got Director Kuhn, Dory, and Stone.
For the benefit of my colleagues here, I'd like to just raise the amount again. In our proposal that was forwarded by staff, the figure that was mentioned for the water project was $3.54 per 100,000. So there would be 0.0354 cents. Now we're looking at 0.4505%, $5. So I just want to get that clear, so there's no misunderstanding that this is not deception or whatever. I'm a stickler on figures, as you know, and I noticed that right away. Many of you might not have even noticed the difference, but there is a big difference, and I want to get the clarity right on the table.
Mr. Kieber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to clarify, the numbers are different because we're referring to different things. The $3 and change referred to the cost for the residential property per 100,000. This is referring to the maximum requisition for all classifications. Two different things and two different numbers.
Director Dory.
Thank you. I think this is a case, be careful what you wish for. I wish that we would have the money in there and the conversion rate and all this sort of thing, but I see that it's become more confusing for the voters to look at this and think. And I know that the province has guidelines that we have to follow, and the staff are trying to follow the guidelines and keep us happy at the same time. And it's getting more complicated. To my mind, I think if we can't use per 100,000, I would say get rid of the red writing and go back to the simpler version and move from there, because the simpler version was clearer than the specific version that nailed everything, but it was too legalistic.
Thank you. Director Stone.
Well, the concern it raises for me is then you say, or an amount equal to greater of 65,000 or 765,000, or an amount equal to the amount blah, blah, blah. We all seen our assessments increase dramatically over the last few years, and basically what you're saying is if assessment values go up 20% per year, you could raise your requisition by 20% per year, and that makes me uncomfortable as a taxpayer. I was comfortable with the number of 765 with a 25% increase in 5 years if it's so warranted. So you're looking at a 4% compounded increase over a 5-year period, roughly, to get you to 25% in 5 years. It changes the question materially to me to tie it to assessment values at 0.04584, because if you look at the assessment growth we've had in the region, 18% last year in our municipality, 15% the year before, and those numbers don't seem to be going down. I'm just not comfortable tying it to assessed values.
Thank you. Mr. Kieber?
So just to be clarified, you can do that, and there are about 10% of the functions you have do that. It limits yourself. You're the one to determine what you want to tax each year. And if you want to put it in the bylaw to do that, it's clear for the public, so you can actually say what you initially had, 750 or 765, and that's it. If you're comfortable with that, you can do that. And then, you're right, you would take most of that red stuff off. We'd have to go back to the original wording that we were playing with, but yes, you could do that.
Yeah, you know, without the second, just to follow up, Mr. Chair, without the last confusing red part that also changes, materially changes the ability to raise that increase. Frankly, I'm more comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable saying that with the rapid assessment increases we've had, that the greater value of 0.0584 per $1,000 of net taxable value is what the requisition is. We've communicated, at least to my understanding, 765 and 750 through this whole engagement process to this point. It materially changes it, because if someone says, you'd be dishonest if you didn't, well, if assessments go up, yeah, we could increase the requisition from 765, we could add another, you know, $153,000 next year if assessments went up 20%. To me, that creates a bigger barrier to the level of support that you'll see.
Thank you. I have a list. Director Marsh is next. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now I'm even more confused, because I've got the watershed bylaw, so I'll talk about that, because what I understand is this is the bylaw, 4202. We passed it in June. And in 4202, it says under number 6, the maximum amount of money that may be requisitioned annually in support of this service shall be the greater amount of $750, or an amount equal to the amount that could be raised by a property tax value of point. So that's the bylaw. So now the question is saying, are you in favor of the bylaw? The bylaw already contains the 4.8, so I'm not sure why. So I don't know directly about Director Nicholson. My concern was people who come in to vote and they don't understand the question. So the people who have read it before, they will understand the question. They'll have read that and they'll go, oh yeah, I know what that means. This doesn't address the people who won't understand the question. And I don't know how you can do that, but I'm not sure I understand why, if you're saying why we have the bylaw, which is already passed. So if this passes, we have that right with the assessment. I just don't understand. I'm just confused.
Well, staff have explained that that you could just pass pass this without that number in it. That was an attempt to address concerns expressed by this board.
No, I understand that. I think Mark is understanding what I'm saying. Because I think I heard you say, Mr. Keeper, then if we didn't have that there, we wouldn't have the ability that the bylaw 4202, which the people would be passing on, has given us. So that's what I find confusing. You mean that if we don't have that in there and we get assent, then bylaw 4202 changes?
So what I was getting at is the way it was initially worded was contradictory. And I think that's what we found. It said, approve the bylaw allow you to do this. They went on further to say, max out at 750, which contradicts what the bylaw was telling you.
Right, because it didn't add what you've added.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, we simply put those numbers, the greater of, into the referendum question, so it now agreed with what the bylaw said.
Right.
So if you wanted to go back and get rid of those numbers, you can simply prove the bylaw.
Yeah.
And after each one, instead of saying an annual requisition, just don't put that in there. Leave that in the bylaw and just prove the wording.
Could you say what the wording would say, what you're suggesting?
Well, each of the way I would read it is that, are you in favor of the Cowichan, the bottom one, the water. Are you in favor of the Cowichan Valley Regional District adopting bylaw number 4202, drinking water and watershed protection service establishment bylaw 2018 to support regional programs related to drinking water and watershed protection, period.
And that's the wording of the parks one.
And I don't know exactly what the park one, but
But
to
it didn't
me,
have money in it.
It didn't have money. So that there tells you, are you approve the bylaw? And do the same thing for the housing one as well, where it just talks about homelessness prevention, period.
Okay. Director Nicholson?
I was just going to say, I think to be actually accurate, you'd have to say up to the greater of 750,000
Yeah, I think you're right.
because of the maximum in the wording there. But I actually am leaning towards getting rid of the financial information completely.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, thank you. That certainly would simplify this, I think. Director Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question and a comment. Will there be copies of the bylaw at the voting places? And will they have like a table of what the residential rate would be compared to the business rate? Because this is the combined rate of everything.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Davis, the bylaw will be at the voting place. There will be no backup information beyond that, because the voting place is where you've already made your decision. You're coming in now to mark yes or no. We cannot bias in any direction, so there's the bylaw. And over the years, when when electors come in and they have questions, I don't know anything about this. How should I vote? We don't answer that. We say, there's the bylaw. You needed to become aware of this before you entered the voting place. You know, if it's early enough in the day, they can go back to the website and check things out and come back. But it's because the voting place is where the actual marking of the ballot takes place. And we have the bylaw there for them.
So at least they would have the numbers when they get there. I'm not as concerned with Director Stone's concerns about the maximum or the requisition limit, because as Mr. Kieber said, we're 90% of the functions we have up to or greater than same kind of language on there. And I don't think there are any that this board has ever tried to keep right at the top, other than maybe some utilities because of the way it works. So, and we even have several functions that don't have a limit, so I'm not too concerned that way. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Morrison.
Thank you. I just relate back to the regional parkland acquisition and the simplicity of the question, and I seem to recall it was quite enthusiastically supported by the public, and it was that simple version of a question. And I also think about the fact that we as a board have asked staff to do a far more robust job in preparing information and material for any sort of assent process that we go through. So it's funny, I can recall this funny lady who was at the Couch and Lake Sports Arena who was talking about parks, and as it turns out, it was Director Marcotte, and she was on the road show and explaining the regional parkland acquisition, and a very successful campaign. And that was before we embarked on this enhanced, prior to the referendum date or the AAP, this enhanced information procedure. So I'm comfortable with just asking the question, making sure that we are very thorough in explaining this information to the people that want to hear and investigate and learn about it. I think it's too late to think that we're going to change minds with what we add to the referendum question for people walking into the polling station cold, and that we have a task in front of us to go out and put this forward and do it well. And this is also just a lesson in trying to craft this sort of thing on the fly. And I think that the simplicity of what's been put forward to drop this financial information on the question makes a lot of sense to me, and I think we should at least consider that. So I would move that we pose these questions and drop the financial information out. So I think somebody had said stop at after period at the end of prevention in the first one and protection in the second one.
Thank you. I'll accept that as a motion, and
And
that's,
add a question mark to every one of them at the end.
thank you. I'll take that as seconded by Director Acton. So we are now on that motion. That's a legitimate motion, even if we have to
Yes,
rescind?
Mr. Chair, what I was going to suggest, and I'm glad Director Morrison wound up in the same place, is right now you're just going to agree on the wording.
All right.
We are then going to have to go back, and it's actually 5 resolutions we're going to have to rescind previously. But let's agree on the
Do
wording.
this first?
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking to the motion, Director Dory, did you want to speak to the motion?
I just wanted to say that we have to trust the staff with the communications of these two issues. And the other thing that's going to happen is that there's an election on, and every one of the people running in the election will be up on this bylaw, or these 2 bylaws, and they will be talking about them. So I can foresee that this will get better coverage than almost any bylaw we've ever put forward, or referendum that we put forward, just by the generation of talk in the community.
Thank you. To the motion, Director Marsh?
It's a question about the motion, because I remember, I believe this has to pass by 2/3 of the board as well, or no?
No.
Oh, okay, simple majority of who's present?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know. I'm willing to support this and at this point, and trust that it will be less confusing to those who are coming in cold.
Thank you. Director Marcotte?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it is a very important point that we do give the people the education and the the understanding of what these bylaws are for and what they're going to accomplish. Everybody wants good water. I don't think that that's really an issue that we're going to be dealing with. But I think that we need to ensure that we do not leave our constituents without all the information that they need to, even if we have to visit 2 or 3 meetings or 4 or 5 meetings in order to get that information out, so that those who come and take the time to study that, then at least when they go to to vote, they will have a good background. And that is our job, to make sure that they need that information that we are discussing today, so that we can do our constituents a good background.
Thank you for that. I'd like to call the question then on the motion. All in favor and opposed? I have Director Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, Jackson, and Dory opposed. The motion carries. So we have our wording. So, Mr. Berry, if you can lead us through
Let's go
the
back
steps
into time here.
to get there.
Okay, let's go way back. So staff report number 1, you passed a resolution earlier approving a synopsis. In the synopsis, it says annually requisition up to $765,000. Based on the discussion here, I would say what I heard from finance, if you're gonna have the 765, you have to have in the property value tax rate of et cetera, because this is a synopsis of the bylaw. Alternatively, you could do what you just did here, and the synopsis could read, allow the CVRD. See, it's a synopsis of the bylaw. So I'm thinking our finance manager and Mr. Kieber, between the two of them, would probably suggest that we add in the greater of.
Greater of, yes, up to, it says up to, or the greater of.
Okay, is someone prepared?
So before we do
Oh.
that, we need to rescind recommendation number 4 that you passed earlier.
Moved by Director Stone, second by Director Morrison. All in favor and opposed? Motion carries.
So then we'll do a new number 4, and I'll read it out, and correct me if I don't get it right. That the following synopsis of bylaw number 4201 be approved. CVRD bylaw number 4201, Cowichan Housing Association, Annual Financial Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw 2018, will allow the CVRD to annually requisition the greater of $765,000 or an amount equal to the amount that could be raised by a property value tax of 0.04584 per 1,000 of net taxable value of land and improvements within the service area to assist the Cowichan Housing Association with costs associated with providing programs and services related to affordable housing and homelessness prevention in the Cowichan Valley.
I have a question, should we not include the up to?
Yes, I was just gonna say, we need to make one slight amendment by including up to the greater of.
Yeah.
To the greater of.
Thank you for that. Moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Marsh. Director Marsh?
So my question is, aside from in our agenda, when and what would be the purpose of the use of this synopsis going forward?
Mr. Chair, through to Director Mars, the Local Government Act requires us to publish the full entire text of the bylaw. That includes whereas, signature blocks, you name it. We have 5 local papers. You're talking thousands of dollars. The synopsis allows you to use that instead of the bylaw. Like, there's really not a lot of benefit in publishing a bylaw with all the white space and the signature blocks and the adopted days. So this is trying to say what the bylaw's about.
So, if I may, would it be essentially saying what's up there?
What I just read out,
But is that essentially the same thing as what's up there, pretty much?
pretty much. Yeah.
So rather than confusing people at the ballot, we'll confuse them in the newspaper?
When they have time to do this.
Okay. And will we be able to say in that synopsis, this is just a synopsis, please go to blah, 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 blah to get the full information?
So in the ad we use for the Sports Society referendum, it says synopsis of proposed bylaw, and what we just read out.
Right.
If you don't have that, the newspaper ad will be another 2 pages.
No, I understand
Yeah.
that, Mr. Berry.
So it says synopsis of proposed bylaw, very clear, that's the synopsis.
I understand that. Go ahead.
So what Director Marsh is asking is, can you then add in the line that says, for further information, please go to the bylaw?
So continuing with the ad, take notice that the above is a synopsis of the proposed bylaw, and this synopsis is not intended to be and is not to be understood as an interpretation of the bylaw. The full bylaw may be inspected at the CVRD office, et cetera, and the website, et cetera. So that's the legislative language we have to use.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
So does that, so we do that in the newspaper. That's the law. We've completed our legislative requirement. Is there anything in the legislation that would prevent us from saying, we printed this because the province said we had to, but we'd really like you to know, and I'm being flippant, but come to these meetings and learn more about this bylaw? Is there anything to prevent us from, okay, so we've done that legal piece. Can we take 3 more lines and say,
Mr. Berry?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we're really branching off.
Yeah.
Chris is sitting over there. He is going to be spending thousands of dollars in ads that people can understand. Frequently, people will refer to these as tombstone ads. They're dry, they're legislative, we have to meet the legal requirements. But in the same paper, CVRD News, common language explaining what this is.
I understand that. I suspect you're not on social media much.
Actually, I am.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll leave it.
Wow. Okay, Director Marcotte?
Thank you. I just want to point out that I don't have a newspaper that is circulated in North Oyster. So I know, Joe, you have some very creative ways of thinking about it, but
Mr.
my
Chair,
basic population do not have access to those kinds of newspapers. So we're going to have to find another way to actually educate my people what this bylaw is all about.
Mr. Chair, I have different information than Director Marcotte just said. A week and a half ago, I drove through North Oyster on a Saturday night coming back from Parksville, and I stopped and checked newspaper distribution boxes, and there are at least 10 to 12 Nanaimo News Bulletin drop boxes next to the mailboxes in Area H. Area H is served, and I've confirmed it physically, by the Nanaimo News Bulletin. It's also available at the only store at the gas station. There's a box right out front with 2 or 3 dozen of the papers. That is considered local newspaper circulation. Area H does have a paper.
I believe we're also planning mail-outs, are we not? There will be mail-outs to individual houses.
Does that cover the legislative requirement?
Every house. Okay, we're straying a bit from the motion, but are we ready to vote on the motion? All in favor and opposed? We have Directors Johnny DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, and Jackson opposed. The motion carries.
Moving on back to, I should say, recommendation number 5, we need to rescind the previous synopsis.
Moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Stone. Any question? All in favor and opposed? Motion carries.
And then a new number 5 with the wording that we have in front of you, but with up to the greater of $750,000 or an amount equal to the amount that could be raised by a property value tax of 0.045050 per 1,000 of net taxable value of land and improvements within the service area.
Moved by Director Stone, second by Director Nicholson. Any question? All in favor? Opposed? Directors Johnny DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, Opposed, motion carries.
So that takes care of the first part of the meeting. We now need to rescind the original amending of bylaw 4228.
Okay, moved by Director Day, second by Director Stone. All in favor? Opposed, motion carries.
We need to rescind the resolution that gave first three readings as amended.
Moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Marsh. All in favor? Opposed, motion carries.
And then we need to rescind the resolution 4228 be adopted.
Moved by Director Stone, second by Director Davis. All in favor? Opposed. Director Yanni DiNardo opposed. The motion carries. And Director Marcotte.
Okay, so now we're really right back at the beginning of B1. So bylaw 4228 be amended with this wording that you've already approved.
Moved by Director Day, second by Director Davis. All in favor? Opposed? Directors Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, and Jackson opposed. The motion carries.
4228, first three readings as amended.
Moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Stone. All in favor? Opposed? Director Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, and Jackson opposed. Motion carries.
Bylaw 4228 for adoption.
Moved by Director Marsh, second by Director Davis. All in favor and opposed? Directors Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, and Jackson opposed. Motion carries.
Now we're back to where we were
For B2,
a little while ago, B2. So amend bylaw 4229 with the wording that's up on the screen for the question.
with, oh, right.
Yeah, so bylaw 4229, what's in front of you right now is the wording in your package. You want to amend it as per the screen. Correct, correct. It's been obviously a long evening without the financial.
Without the red and
Yeah.
with the, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's moved by Director,
Yes, oh, that as well.
the wording we agreed on, which removed that part. Moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Stone. Any question? All in favor? Opposed? Directors Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, Jackson, and Dory opposed. The motion carries.
Bylaw 4229, first three readings as amended.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? Directors Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, and Jackson opposed. Motion carries.
And 4229 for adoption.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Day. All in favor? And opposed? Directors Yanni DiNardo, Marcotte, Kuhn, Jackson, and Dory opposed. Motion carries. Wow, that was fun.
That's it for the bylaws this evening.
Thank you. That was 2 bylaws.
Yes.
Okay. We can go on to unfinished business.
Yes, Mr. Chair, you'll recall at the last board meeting, we had a presentation from Tom Rutherford regarding the Cowichan Watershed Board, Governance Manual and Operating Procedure Support, and you were requested to review the material and support the Watershed Board in their request. And there's a recommendation that the Cowichan Watershed Board Governance Manual and Operating Procedures be supported.
Moved by Director Marsh, second by Director Stone. Any question on this? All in favor and opposed? None opposed, motion carries. New business item, Director Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following up on a grant and aid given earlier, I have a motion that if I could get a seconder for, I'd like to speak to. So that bylaws be prepared for a new recreation contribution service encompassing all of Area D, Cowichan Bay. I just sent that to everybody. Yep.
Mr. Berry, how do we handle this when we're just getting something sent by email?
I'll read that out so
Okay.
everybody can hear. So Director Davis has put forward and moved that bylaws be prepared for a new recreation contribution service encompassing all of Area D, Cowichan Bay.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Director Nicholson.
I wish this had been put forward to staff ahead of time because a bylaw must include a dollar figure. And that's the first thing I can think of right off the top of my head.
Fair enough.
Okay, Director Davis did ask for, because he's presenting it, that I'll go to Director Yanni DiNardo.
Considering
I'm
I'm.
sorry, Director Davis moved it, so he gets the first opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pretty much every electoral area in the CVRD has a community center of some sort. Some even have more than one. I believe areas E and F have 3 each. And most of them were built before the CVRD even existed. And since then, almost all of them have a contribution service of one sort or another. And we've had the group from Cowichan Bay come asking us to help them with that on several occasions, about a month ago most recently. And when Area B wanted one, they had to start a service so that they could find a way to pay for it. So I thought that it would be good to have one for Area D. And Mr. Barry tells me that this is about as late as we can get it onto the 2019 budget. No? So as far as doing this, it would be a good thing to start so that they could save up for one. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. So.
Thank you. Just a clarification, Mr. Kieber, on the timing, or Mr. Berry?
Mr. Berry can correct me, but I believe it's too late. At this point, we need the bylaws to already have been gone through our board and as well as gone through the province and back to us to be adopted, be able to make in time for the.
Mr. Chair, just to add to that, because Director Davis and I spoke yesterday, and I informed him, absolutely too late for the election and the referendum. Like, no question about it. But where Director Davis went, and his question was, could we still have it approved? It would have to be by AAP by the time the budget's adopted in March. The answer to that would be yes. However, what's put in front of us, and I'm going to use the term I've heard here before, it's a green banana. I couldn't write a bylaw because we don't have the description of what it's going to be, et cetera. So that's going to delay it longer. It's going to go down to the province. Remember, there's an election campaign going on, so the province is going to be kind of busy. They're going to take, I'm going to say, at least 2 months, 3 months to approve the bylaws. During that time, you would have to have public consultation on this. You're going to have to give it first 3 readings.
Challenging. Director Yanni DiNardo?
Talk about a green banana. What the hell is this? Like, this is just, what is this? And this is absolutely ridiculous. It comes, the area director knows nothing about it, and there's a late notice of recreation. This is extremely unfair, and I don't know why it's being brought up now. And this is, can you just explain why you are bringing this up, Director Davis?
Sure. I've been approached by several members of Cowichan Bay who've asked us to help them do something about it, and it's no greener than LNG.
Okay. Director Kuhn, and then Director Jackson.
I find it simply wrong that an area director meddles in the affairs of another area. I just can't see it. I mean, if that should be initiated by Director Yanni DiNardo, and if she, who's acting on behalf of her area, if she doesn't feel that's right and she doesn't do it, that's her responsibility. For another director to come in and say, well, let's establish, that's unacceptable to me, sorry.
Thank you. Director Stone?
I would move that this be referred to the Electoral Area Services Committee for discussion.
Do I
This is
have a
not appropriate.
seconder for that? Seconded by Director Marsh. On the motion to refer, Director Jackson, there's a motion to refer.
I think that there should be no motion to refer. This is clearly in the ballpark of the area director. This referral motion is inappropriate. The original motion was inappropriate, and I don't think this should be referred at all. I think it should die here on the table tonight.
Okay. On the motion to refer, all those in favor?
Can I speak quick? It is on the motion. Oh, I guess it's just to refer. So I can't.
Oh, no, you can,
Okay. Oh, then I can't. I'll probably screw up, but I don't mean to. It seems to me that if we are a board that's supposed to represent our whole region, and we've heard from a director that there are people from our region who are asking for a service, it would be smart for the electoral area directors to talk about that. So I support the referral. Because there's
Okay.
different, like, what if you have a director that doesn't agree with some people?
okay,
Well, anyway, so that's why I support the referral.
I'll call the question then. I'm sorry, Director Nicholson?
I don't really have enough information to think this one through, but I do know that we talked about doing a regional recreation or a sub-regional recreation kind of exercise to look at recreation needs and where we need to go. And is this perhaps something that could be dealt with through that process?
I'm sorry,
So the regional recreation process
It's dead? Dead in the
will
water?
include, I think you're correct. Yeah, I think so. Anyways, but right now we have a motion to refer. Director Yanni DiNardo on the motion.
This, I have actually, even what we passed tonight, $1,200 grant and aid, I have been working with my community on this. We have been working appropriately. We've been working on looking for different things. So I don't know how this has anything to do with the Area A director, and it needs no referral. And it should just, exactly what it should do is just die right here. This is more than a green banana. This is a revenge over, it's obvious what it is. So, I mean, I work with my community all the time, and we are working towards looking for a community center, and it's been a long time, so.
Okay, on the motion to refer, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? We have to
Mr.
take
Chair,
account here.
because we're at a board meeting, we have to record everybody who's opposed. It would be easier if we could see the hands of those who are in favor, because there weren't that many. So in favor of the referral was
Director Nicholson, Director Davis, Director Morrison, Director Stone, Director Marsh, and Director Dory.
Point of order. Not very often do we take the vote this way. Quite often, people don't even vote, but are in favor. And in this particular vote, people didn't vote, so they would be in favor. So, and you can't force people to vote.
Yeah. Well, everybody votes.
Mr. Chair,
Everybody
everybody
does vote.
votes, and we've done this in a simplicity. Apparently, that's not working tonight. So everybody who's opposed, please raise your hands, and we will have to make sure we get them directly.
So Director Day, Director Yanni DiNardo, Director Marcotte, Director Kuhn, Director Jackson, and myself.
So we have 6 opposed.
7 in favor.
And we are down 2, so right at this moment, we have 13 here.
So it sounds like a 7-6 vote in favor.
So it carries.
Okay, so that motion is referred. Okay, we can move on then to question period. And for those brave souls who are still here, If you would like to ask a question about something on the agenda, we will try and answer it. Looks like we wore them out. Okay, a motion to adjourn. Moved by Director Davis, seconded by Director Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.